Here we are at day 3 of Victoria Beer Week, and today we have beer school. We have Greg Evans, esteemed Victoria-based beer historian. So Greg, what got you into the idea of beer history as a discipline, as a passion?
Basically, back in the 70s, I moved and worked in England for a while, fell in love with the beer scene, an organization called CAMRA, beer and brewing history everywhere you looked. Came back to Victoria and found out that very little, if anything, had been done to look into and celebrate our brewing heritage, and that's what got me started. Went to University of Victoria, did my master's degree in the history of brewing on Vancouver Island, and it's just been full throttle all the way since then.
How did you manage to do a master's in something that other people don't do?
Well, I did a master's in history, a specialization in industrial history, and that allowed me to delve into the history of brewing on Vancouver Island. There had only been 4 or 5 other people that had done an MA thesis on the history of brewing in North America. So I didn't have a lot of colleagues, but those people I did get to know, we formed a bond and still have that bond. So yeah, industrial history would be my specialization.
So in your own way, it's actually very similar to the brewing pioneers, people that had to forge their own way when there weren't other brew pubs and other breweries. You had to sort of pioneer beer learning in this area.
So I was the first to look at some documents in 100 years. So there was no historiography had been created on the history of brewing in BC. So as I did research, I was creating historiography and looking at material that had just literally had dust on it and had not been looked at for absolutely decades. It's kind of exciting, really.
Well, now, if it had dust on it, that means it was somewhere. Where was this physical material, for instance?
Provincial archives, local archives around BC, and there I was very fortunate that I got to know a number of old-timers from the brewing industry, most of whom have passed away now, who shared very generously with me their own family histories. Photographs that I have about 400 photographs in my collection. I would say at least 100 of those are not in the public domain at all, but were given to me by family members who just were so thrilled that I was sitting down with them interviewing guys that were in their 80s and 90s then. That's in the 1980s.
Okay, so it was a treat for them to know that their family history was going to be recorded and it was going to be passed on.
Yeah, and a real treat for me to sit down. And I'd say that I became good friends with several of these fellows. Some of them in the industry at that time were legendary guys, but our history had forgotten them.
Right, because there wasn't until the craft wave, and the craft wave celebrates a completely different generation of brewing. That would make sense that they would appreciate somebody looking into their history.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of that, so with now you being also part of the craft beer, I'm sure you're a craft beer enthusiast, of course. So how do you see your study of these breweries that weren't actually what we would now call a craft brewery? How does it overlap with what were they like compared to today's breweries like this?
Well, one thing that has struck me is that the craft brewers of today are reintroducing styles that our grandfathers and great-grandfathers were used to. In other words, it's the old saying, everything old is new again, or everything new is, you know that statement. So we're looking at people that have brought back the beers that people were drinking here before the First World War and into the 20s and 30s after Prohibition. So the variety that my grandfather had when he immigrated here from England in 1919-ish had disappeared by the 60s. 70s it was gone. So the craft brewers have the passion and they reintroduce styles to us, because in the old days we had all sorts of beer, wheat beers, Bock beers, you name it. But by the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, you couldn't. Molson's and Labatt's, they weren't brewing this sort of stuff. They didn't care. Right. So a lot of these old timers that I got to interview when the craft beer movement came along, absolutely thrilled
Awesome.
because it was their history coming back.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Good to know. So we're at Swans. We're celebrating Victoria Beer Week. It's day 3, and Greg is about to teach us beer school. When was it, Greg, that you started this learning and did your degree?
I started my research in 1984 and finished my master's degree in 1991. It was part-time because I was working for a while. So 7 years. It took me 7 years to do it part-time, but it got done.
And so Greg's been learning this and studying this as long as Swan's been open. So
pretty much, yeah. And the thing I like to remember is the day that I went to physically defend my thesis at UVic. My thesis team and some good friends came with me to support me. It went well. You know what we did after that? We went for a craft beer. There you go.